Good morning. This morning's reading is a psalm, Psalm 121, the assurance of God's protection. I lift up my eyes to the hills. From where will my help come? My help comes from the Lord, who made heaven and earth. He will not let your foot be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. He who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun shall not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all evil. He will keep your life. The Lord will keep your going out, your coming in, and from this time on and forevermore.
During our time of reflection, you can see in our bulletin, we're going to have a pattern of singing verses from Highland Cathedral and then having a short reflection after each verse. And Robert Henderson is with me. Robert is the director of our pipers and offers his words of grace every year to our congregation. And so I am happy to have you here today, Robert, and we give thanks that you're here. So we will invite us to sing the first verse of Highland Cathedral. Robert told me he was not singing a solo, so.
Can I do an introduction?
Oh, he has an introduction first, and then we'll go into that. There we go. All right.
We opened today's service with the Tartan procession to the music of Highland Cathedral, and it was written by two German chaps that didn't play bagpipes, but they really liked the British pipe bands that were at the bases in Germany, and they were inspired by what they heard, and they wrote that tune not even knowing our scale. The focus of today's service is mountains, and the opening verse of Highland Cathedral, their lyrics are by Jack White. You have to sing now. Lifting their snowy heads and shoulders. If you looked out west, there's a good snowpack. I think coming next month, we might see some heavy water. The mountains are, Reverend Sheena gave some very apt descriptions, but barrier is one of them as well, too. My grandfather was born in Aberdeenshire, Scotland, and came out here in 1907. And my dad used to drive the family out to Banff with my grandfather. I remember going once, and he would always say that they're nice, but they're not as big as Ben Nevis. Mountains are a natural barrier created over millions of years. The ones we can see are the Rockies on the North American tectonic plate that are scraping the debris off the Pacific plate and forming the coastal mountains, and as it slides under, and they're hard to miss. It does happen, though. In 1754, now if you're traveling up the Queen Elizabeth II Highway and you're at Innisfail, top of the hill, you'll see a plaque for Anthony Henday. He was exploring here in the mid-1700s for the far reaches of Rupert's Land, and to determine how the company could expand its trade and hopefully find a river passage across the continent. He paused when he came to what is now known as Innisfail Hill and wrote in his journal, the water is very now salty, smells like brine. He didn't mention the mountains at all, but he was giving them an intimation that there was fresh water meeting seawater where he could see it. He didn't mention the mountains at all. They were right before his eyes. They must have been closed. Fur traders would eventually establish Howe's Pass up near Jasper, and if you know the top is Committee Punch Bowl, as a way of getting over the mountains and then connect to the Columbia River to develop New Caledonia on the west side of the Rockies. Okay, second verse. Now, some of you may have known Jack White. He was a early in his career, he was here in Calgary, and he was a radio personality, and he was also a Burns impersonator, and later on he became an author. But we'd been asked to do a recording for the regimental history in 1990, and Highland Cathedral, we just had played that at the Nova Scotia Tattoo in '89, and we thought we'd got to put that on there, and he decided, he was going to do some words, but they didn't come until he was on a fishing boat, I think his own rowboat, with the line out in the water in Burrard Inlet out on the west coast. And he said he looked around, and that's when the words started to come. So the words that you have here are those that he had to put down his fishing rod and write them down in order to get them so he could get back to the piece of fishing. Because if you're composing, they never stop. And also that second verse kind of is reminiscent of Tartan as well too, because they give you the colors of the mountain. So if you can start to see the image in your head, the words and the music are working. In 1881, the Canadian Pacific Railway was founded with the purpose of building a rail link between Canada and British Columbia, and they were looking at Howse Pass or Yellowhead to get the job done. It was more southerly route could not be found. The rail would have to head north at great expense, and you have to remember the CPR was a Scottish company. This was irksome, and Olds or Innisfail would become major shipping points on the Transcontinental Railway. Fort Calgary would become a way station like Alderside or abandoned entirely. Calgary's population in 1880 was 4. There were 2 at the fort and 1 each at the Hudson's Bay Company Post and the I.G. Baker Post. Roman Catholics at the Mission and Métis, who had come down once the natives had been confined to the Reserve at Gleason, were not counted. So the prospects were grim. Then in July 1882, Major Rogers made the long-awaited discovery of the pass at the Illicellewaet River. It was a major construction hurdle, but it was the best that could be found. Now, as a reminder, in elevation, Revelstoke is 2,000 feet below Calgary. So you had to get up the pass, and then that's why you have 64 miles of downhill to get to Revelstoke. Construction paused for the chill of winter in 1882 at Maple Creek, Northwest Territories, now Saskatchewan. Quite south for the Howse Pass, Calgary suddenly had a future, and settlers started to trickle into the settlement. Knox was part of that influx from the very beginning, with its first church building in Inglewood. In early 1884, the church was dragged over the frozen ground and across the Spirit River to the CPR town site of Calgary. It had been laid out in January of that year. But by 1885, the mountains had been conquered to the best of man's ability, which is really, when you think about it, only a temporary situation. And Knox was placed, for those of you who remember where the York Hotel was, that's where it was. That'd be across the avenue from the Hyatt Regency Hotel. And mountains are a significant part of Calgary from the earliest years, into the present and well into the future. Just look at our provincial shield. And its foundation at the back is the mountains. People come from all over the world to see our mountains, and they come to Calgary. And it's a starting point for going over the mountains, and it's a long-standing source of pride and community in our area. Verse 5, sorry. Ready? So look to the mountains when you turn to pray. See how they strive for heaven every day, lifting their snowy heads and shoulders
There's something about the mountains. When I was a child, our vacations were often spent in the mountains. Mostly we would head to the back country of Yosemite and other areas of the Sierra Nevada mountains in California. I think Roman has a couple of pictures of Yosemite, but also the Bow Valley. That's Castle Mountain. The quiet, strong mountains fed my parents' souls. If you've ever stood at the base of a mountain in the Yosemite Valley or the Bow Valley or anywhere else, you know the experience of being in the presence of ancient grandeur. It's not surprising that many of our biblical stories take place on the top of mountains. They were considered places where the divine could be experienced. It's on a mountain, you might remember, that Moses receives the 10 Commandments, and it's on a mountain where Elijah encounters God's still small voice. It's on a mountain where Jesus is transfigured and where he teaches the Beatitudes. The mountains still have that spiritual draw for many of us. Many of us experience the sacred as we hike or camp in the mountains, or as we drive through a valley, or as we sit and look up at the majesty of a mountain range in front of us. John Muir, the naturalist, wrote in his book, Our National Parks, this. He says, "Thousands of tired, nerve-shaken, over-civilized people are beginning to find out that going to the mountains is going home, that wildness is a necessity, and that mountain parks and reservations are useful not only as fountains of timber and irrigating rivers, but as fountains of life." How many of us resonate with those words? The mountains call us. They give us a sense of just how small we are in this vast universe. And they also give us a sense of stability as they predate us by thousands of years and will continue to be here for thousands of years after we are gone. Their beauty inspires, and their majesty awes. We will continue to sing verses 3 and 4 as we take in that language of awe and beauty. The author of this hymn understands the mountains as sacred spaces. Higher and higher, steeple and spire, buttress, gable, and soaring tower, unable to speak of the majesty. Likewise, the Psalms are filled with songs about God's creation. The writers were very attuned to their surroundings and God's presence. The psalm that Rod read a few minutes ago is one that is often read in times of challenge or in times of grief. I lift my eyes to the hills. From where does my help come? My help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. The psalmist looks toward the hills for the reminder of God's presence and keeping. Perhaps it's because more than other things in creation, mountains seem to remain unchanging. Scholars believe that this particular song was a litany, sort of like our call to worship, where the religious leader would say one line and then the congregation would answer back and forth. It is believed it was probably part of a service for people who were about to embark on a journey. I imagine that is why we connect with this psalm centuries later. It speaks to our concerns about our own lives and our own need to be reassured that God is also with us, just like the mountains. The opening line of the psalm is a question. I look to the hills. From where does my help come? And then the answer, my help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. The religious leaders knew that their people would be worried and anxious, and so they put together a blessing for them as they begin their journeys. And they offer this blessing and assurance that God goes with them. In fact, it's even more than that. God keeps them. Chief John Snow of the Stony people, and also Tony Snow's father, wrote a book titled "The Mountains Are Our Sacred Places." If you haven't read it yet, I think everybody who lives in Calgary and close to the Bow Valley should read this book. In the book, he writes about the sacredness of the Bow Valley to the Stony people. He writes this: "These mountains are our temples, our sanctuaries, and our resting places. They are a place of hope, a place of vision, a place of refuge, a very special and holy place where Great Spirit speaks with us. Therefore, the mountains are our sacred places." And so today, as we reflect on mountains and God's creation, we give thanks for these ancient and beautiful expressions of God's very being, one who keeps us and one who gives us hope. Amen. We will sing our final verse.